The wind howled across the barren plains of Montana Territory, carrying with it the dust of 1,000 broken dreams. Samuel McKenna stood on the porch of his weathered cabin, squinting against the harsh afternoon sun that beat down mercilessly on the parched grasslands. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks shrouded in a haze that promised no relief from the drought that had gripped the land for months. At 34, Samuel cut a lonely figure against the vast emptiness. His broad shoulders, built from years of wrestling cattle and mending fences, seemed to bear the weight of more than just physical labor. The lines etched deep around his gray eyes told stories of winters survived alone, of conversations held only with the wind and his small herd of longhorns. His hands, calloused and scarred, gripped the porch railing as he surveyed his modest spread 40 acres of stubborn earth that he'd carved into something resembling a life. The cabin behind him stood as a testament to his solitary existence, built with his own hands from local pine. It contained just 3 rooms, a main area that served as kitchen and sitting room, a small bedroom, and a storage room that doubled as a shelter during the worst storms. The furniture was sparse and functional: a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, though only one ever saw use, and a bed that had known no warmth but his own for the 7 years since he'd claimed this land. It was the emptiness of that second chair that had finally driven him to his decision. Samuel reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a crumpled newspaper clipping from the Denver Post, dated 3 months prior. He'd read the advertisement so many times the ink had begun to fade. Respectable Eastern ladies seek correspondence with marriageable Western gentlemen. Christian women of good standing. Matrimonial Agency of Boston. The letter had been the hardest thing he'd ever written. Harder than breaking a wild Mustang or surviving that winter of 73 when the snow had piled higher than his windows. How did a man put his loneliness into words? How did he explain the ache of watching sunsets with no one to share their beauty, of cooking meals in portions for one, of talking to his horse just to hear a voice, even his own, break the oppressive silence? But he'd managed it, somehow. Sent it off with the $50 the agency required, nearly 2 months' profit from his last cattle sale. And then he'd waited. 6 weeks later, a response had arrived. Miss Catherine Winters of Philadelphia, age 23, educated, skilled in domestic arts, seeking a stable home and honest husband in the Western Territories. Her photograph showed a demure young woman with dark hair pulled back severely, eyes downcast, the very picture of Eastern propriety. Today was the day. Samuel had ridden the 20 miles to Millfield at dawn, his best shirt pressed as well as his old flat iron could manage, his boots polished to an unfamiliar shine. The whole town knew why he was there. News traveled fast in a place where any deviation from routine was cause for speculation and gossip. Now he stood with a gathering crowd outside Morrison's general store, watching the dust cloud that announced the approaching stagecoach. His heart hammered against his ribs like a spooked bronc trying to break free. Around him, the townspeople whispered and pointed. There was old Walt from the barber shop, his scissors temporarily forgotten in his excitement. Mrs. Morrison had abandoned her store counter to crane her neck from the doorway. Even Sheriff Hayes had found reason to patrol this particular stretch of Main Street at this particular time. The stagecoach rolled into view, wheels creaking and protesting against the rutted road. The driver, Big Jim Sullivan, pulled the team to a stop with a flourish that sent another cloud of dust billowing over the assembled crowd. Samuel stepped forward, his mouth dry as the surrounding plains, his hands trembling slightly as he smoothed down his hair. Big Jim climbed down and began unloading luggage with theatrical slowness, clearly enjoying his role in the day's drama. The coach door opened, and Samuel held his breath. A traveling salesman emerged first, followed by an elderly woman clutching a carpet bag. And then, the woman who stepped down from the coach was not Catherine Winters. Samuel knew it instantly, knew it with a certainty that hit him like a physical blow. This woman's hair was not dark, but blazing red, untamed curls escaping from beneath a hat that had seen better days. She wore a dress of deep purple, a color no respectable Eastern lady would choose for traveling. The neckline was cut lower than propriety dictated, and the fabric clung to her curves in a way that spoke of experience rather than innocence. But it was her face that truly betrayed her identity. Where Catherine Winter's photograph had shown downcast eyes and modest bearing, this woman met the crowd's gaze directly. Her chin lifted in defiance, her green eyes held a hardness born of survival, and her full lips were painted a shade of red that marked her profession as clearly as any sign. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a silence so complete that Samuel could hear his own blood pounding in his ears. Then someone, he couldn't tell who, spoke the words that would echo through the town for months to come. The rancher ordered a bride, but the town's harlot stepped off the wagon instead. Samuel recognized her then. Lily Thorne. He'd seen her once or twice on his infrequent trips to town, always from a distance, always surrounded by whispers and turned backs. She worked at the Crimson Garter on the far side of town, the establishment that good folks pretended didn't exist. The woman men visited in darkness and denounced in daylight. The crowd's silence broke into a cacophony of shocked exclamations, derisive laughter, and scandalized whispers. Samuel stood frozen, his face burning with a shame so intense it felt like physical pain. He was aware of every eye upon him, every smirk and shake of the head. His reputation, carefully built over 7 years of honest work and fair dealing, crumbled around him like a house of cards. Lily Thorne stood beside the stagecoach, her single trunk at her feet, maintaining that defiant posture even as the crowd's reaction washed over her. But Samuel, even in his mortification, caught something else in her expression. A flicker of hurt quickly masked, a tightening around her eyes that spoke of pride taking yet another blow. Sheriff Hayes pushed through the crowd, his hand resting on his pistol. What's the meaning of this, woman? This some kind of joke? Lily's chin lifted another fraction. No joke. Sheriff, I've got a letter right here says I'm expected. She pulled a folded paper from her reticule. The same matrimonial agency letterhead Samuel had received. That's impossible. Mrs. Morrison shrilled. Samuel McKenna sent for a respectable bride, not a... She couldn't bring herself to say the word. Samuel finally found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. There's been some mistake. Has there? Lily's eyes found his, and something in that green gaze made him falter. You, Samuel McKenna? The one who wrote to the agency about wanting a wife? He nodded, unable to deny it with the whole town watching. Then there's no mistake. I'm the one who answered your letter. She held out another paper, his own letter, in his own clumsy handwriting. Catherine Winters doesn't exist, Mr. McKenna, but I do, and I paid the agency their fee same as you. The implications hit him like a stampede. She'd lied, used a false name, a false photograph, deceived him and the agency both. The humiliation deepened. If such a thing were possible, he'd been made a fool of in front of the entire town. You can't seriously expect, he began, but she cut him off. I expect, she said clearly, her voice carrying to every eager ear. Exactly what was promised in our correspondence. A home, a chance at a different life. Marriage to an honest man who needed a wife. That's what you advertised for, isn't it? The crowd erupted again, voices overlapping in their eagerness to express outrage. Samuel caught fragments. Scandalous. Decent women should. Never seen such brass. Through it all, Lily stood perfectly still, weathering their judgment like a rock in a storm. And despite everything, his embarrassment, his anger at being deceived, his awareness of social ruin, Samuel felt a grudging spark of admiration for her courage. How many stones had been cast at her? How many times had she stood like this, alone against the world's contempt? Mr. McKenna. Sheriff Hayes' voice cut through the din. You want me to put her back on the next stage? Can't have her staying here causing trouble. It was a lifeline, an easy escape from this nightmare. All Samuel had to do was nod, and Lily Thorne would disappear from his life as suddenly as she'd entered it. He could salvage something of his reputation, claim he'd been swindled, play the victim rather than the fool. But as he opened his mouth to agree, he made the mistake of looking at her again, really looking, Beneath the paint and defiance, he saw exhaustion, saw the careful way she held herself, as if ready to absorb whatever blow came next, saw the white-knuckled grip she maintained on her small trunk, probably everything she owned in the world, and he heard his mother's voice, dead these 15 years but clear as day in his memory. Samuel McKenna, we're judged not by how we treat our betters, but by how we treat those the world's cast aside. No, he heard himself say. No, Sheriff, I'll handle this myself. Another wave of whispers. Lily's eyes widened slightly. The first crack in her armor. You can't mean to take her with you, Walt the barber said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Samuel's jaw tightened. I said I'll handle it. This is between her and me. He couldn't bring himself to call her Miss Thorne, not with the town watching. Come on, he said to Lily, reaching for her trunk. My wagon's at the livery. She studied him for a long moment, seeming to weigh his intentions. Then she nodded once, picked up her reticule, and followed him through the crowd that parted before them like the Red Sea, though whether from respect or revulsion. Samuel couldn't tell. The walk to the livery stable felt like a mile, though it was only 100 yards. Samuel was acutely aware of Lily's presence beside him, of the eyes following their progress, of the whispers that trailed in their wake. His shoulders hunched against their judgment, but he forced himself to keep walking. Neither spoke until they reached his wagon, a modest buckboard pulled by 2 steady mares. Samuel hefted her trunk into the back, surprised by its lightness. Whatever life she was leaving behind, it hadn't amounted to much in material terms. You don't have to do this, she said quietly, the first time her voice had lost its defiant edge. I know what they're thinking, what they'll say. You can still back out. Samuel looked at her then, really looked at her in the relative privacy of the stable, up close. He could see that the paint didn't quite hide the circles under her eyes, that the proud tilt of her chin was costing her effort to maintain. Get in, was all he said. The wagon rolled out of Millfield under the weight of 100 stairs. Samuel kept his eyes fixed on the rumps of his mares, jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Beside him, Lily Thorne sat with her back straight as a fence post, hands folded in her lap, gazing ahead as if the townspeople lining the street were no more than fence posts themselves. Look at her, sitting there bold as brass. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried from the mercantile steps, acting like she's a real bride. Poor Sam McKenna, another woman clucked. 7 years building his good name, gone in an instant. He'll put her on the next stage. Mark my words. Walt the barber called out to general agreement. No decent man would keep company with her kind. Samuel's knuckles whitened on the reins. Each word struck like a physical blow. But Lily beside him might have been carved from stone for all the reaction she showed. Only the slight tightening of her folded hands betrayed that she heard every poisonous syllable. They passed the Crimson Garter on their way out of town, its painted facade gaudy even in daylight. A few women lounged on the upper balcony, and Samuel heard one call out, That's right, Lily, get yourself a respectable man. Show them hypocrites what's what. Lily's composure cracked then. Just slightly. Her head turned toward the voice, and Samuel caught a glimpse of something raw in her expression before she faced forward again. Once clear of town, the prairie stretched endlessly before them, grass brown and brittle from the drought. The mountains loomed in the distance, purple-blue and remote as the future Samuel had imagined with his mail-order bride. The road was little more than wagon ruts carved into the hard earth, and the buckboard jolted over every stone and hole. They rode in silence for miles. The only sounds, the creak of wagon wheels and the steady clop of hooves. Samuel's mind churned with anger, embarrassment, and a dozen questions he couldn't bring himself to ask. What kind of woman deceived a man this way? What desperation had driven her to such lengths? And what in God's name was he supposed to do with her now? The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly. Samuel noticed Lily's face growing flushed beneath her powder, perspiration beading on her forehead. Her traveling dress, meant for show rather than prairie weather, looked stifling in the heat. There's water in the canteen under the seat, he said gruffly, his first words since leaving town. She glanced at him, seeming surprised by even this small courtesy, then retrieved the canteen and drank sparingly. "Thank you," she said quietly, offering it to him. He shook his head, eyes still fixed ahead. Another mile passed before he spoke again. "Why?" The single word hung between them like a challenge. Lily was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its defiant edge. "Would you have written back if you'd known the truth? Would any man? That's no excuse for lying." "No," she agreed. "It's not." She turned the canteen in her hands, watching the water slosh inside. "But when you're drowning, you don't much care if the rope thrown to you is meant for someone else." Samuel glanced at her then, saw the exhaustion he'd glimpsed at the stage stop had returned. The crimson garter pay that poorly? A bitter laugh escaped her. "The garter pays what it pays, but money isn't everything, Mr. McKenna. Sometimes a body gets tired of being what everyone expects them to be. Sometimes they dream of being something else, someone else, even if it's foolish, even if it's bound to fail." They crossed Willow Creek, the water low and sluggish from the drought. Samuel let the horses drink while he checked the wagon wheels. When he looked back, Lily had climbed down and was kneeling by the creek, splashing water on her face and neck. The paint and powder washed away in pink rivulets, revealing the woman beneath, younger than he'd thought, maybe 25 or 26, with a scatter of freckles across her nose that the cosmetics had hidden. She caught him looking and stiffened, then deliberately finished washing her face clean. "No point pretending now, is there?" she said, but there was vulnerability in her voice that hadn't been there before. They continued on, the landscape growing more desolate with each mile. The few trees they passed were stunted and dry, their leaves curled against the heat, cattle bones, bleached white by the sun, marked where less fortunate ranchers had lost stock to the drought. Hawks circled overhead, riding thermals in the shimmering air. "This your land?" Lily asked as they turned onto an even rougher track. "Starting here, yes, 40 acres, running up to that ridge." He pointed to a line of rocky hills. "Not much, but it's mine. You built it up yourself. Every fence post, every building. Despite everything, pride crept into his voice. Started with nothing but a claim stake and determination." They passed his cattle, a small herd of longhorns grazing on what little grass remained. The beasts raised their heads to watch the wagon pass, ribs showing through their hides. "They look hungry," Lily observed. "Everyone's hungry this year. Drought's been hard on all of us." He paused, then added, "Will be a lean winter if rain doesn't come soon." The cabin came into view, small and weathered against the vast landscape. Samuel felt a fresh wave of shame seeing it through her eyes. The patched roof, the crooked chimney, the meager vegetable garden burnt to nothing by the sun. What must she think, coming from town life to this? "It's not much," he said defensively. "It's honest," she replied, and something in her tone made him look at her. "That's more than I had." He pulled the wagon up to the porch, dust swirling around them. For a moment, neither moved. The reality of their situation settled over them like the dust two strangers bound by deception and circumstance, alone in the middle of nowhere. "I'll get your trunk," Samuel said finally. "Mr. McKenna." Her voice stopped him as he climbed down. "What happens now? You could take me back tomorrow, claim you were swindled. No one would blame you." He stood there, one hand on the wagon, wrestling with the question he'd been avoiding since leaving town. What did happen now? He'd acted on impulse, or maybe pride, refusing to abandon her to the sheriff. But now, faced with the reality of her presence at his home, he felt lost. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it's late afternoon, and that's 20 miles of hard road. We'll figure it out tomorrow." She nodded, accepting this reprieve, and climbed down from the wagon. Samuel hauled her trunk to the porch, acutely aware of her following behind. The cabin door stuck as always, The wood had swelled in the winter and never quite gone back to normal. He shouldered it open, revealing the spare interior. Lily stepped inside, her eyes taking in everything. The rough table, the 2 chairs, the cold stove, the narrow doorway leading to the single bedroom. If she was disappointed, she didn't show it. "Where should I?" She gestured to her trunk. The question brought home the awkwardness of their situation. There was only one bed, and while Samuel had vague notions of sleeping in the barn, the practicalities of their arrangement loomed large. "You can have the bedroom," he said brusquely. "I'll bunk in here." "That's not necessary. I can—" "The bedroom," he repeated firmly. "Whatever else you are, you're a woman and a guest under my roof. That demands certain proprieties." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. She picked up her trunk, struggling slightly with its weight. But when he moved to help, she shook her head. "I can manage." While she settled her few belongings, Samuel busied himself with evening chores, bringing in wood, checking the water barrel, feeding the chickens. Routine tasks that kept his hands busy and his mind from dwelling on the impossible situation he'd created. When he came back inside, Lily had tied an apron over her traveling dress and was examining the contents of his pantry. "You weren't expecting company," she said dryly, surveying the meager supplies: cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, and little else. "I manage fine on my own," he said defensively. "I'm sure you do." She rolled up her sleeves, revealing pale forearms. "But since I'm here, I might as well earn my keep. Do you have any eggs?" "A few, maybe. Hens haven't been laying much in this heat." She found 3 eggs in the nest box, along with some wild onions growing near the well. Within an hour, she'd transformed his simple supplies into something resembling a meal cornbread that wasn't burnt on the bottom, beans seasoned with the onions and a bit of salt pork, and an egg dish he couldn't identify but that smelled better than anything his kitchen had produced in years. They ate in silence. The only sound, the scrape of forks on tin plates. Samuel found himself stealing glances at her, trying to reconcile the woman across from him with the painted figure who'd stepped off the stage. Without the cosmetics, she looked both younger in years, perhaps, but older in experience. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of hard living, but also a determined set to her mouth that suggested strength. "You cook well," he said finally, the words awkward in the quiet. "Had to learn, the garter doesn't serve meals, but a girl gets hungry." She pushed beans around her plate. "Learned a lot of things I never thought I'd need." Night was falling by the time they finished eating, prairie darkness creeping in through the windows. Samuel lit the oil lamp, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Lily cleared the dishes without being asked, heating water on the stove to wash them. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I do." She scrubbed a plate with more force than necessary. "I know what you're thinking. Why doesn't she just go back where she came from? But I can't, won't." She set the plate aside and turned to face him. "I've been Lily Thorne for 5 years. Mr. McKenna before that. I was Mary Elizabeth Thornton, daughter of a railroad clerk in Ohio. When my parents died of fever, I had nothing, no family, no money, no skills except a pretty face. You do what you have to do to survive." "I didn't ask." "No, but you're wondering. They all wonder. How does a decent girl end up like me?" She laughed bitterly. "One compromise at a time. That's how. First, it's just serving drinks to lonely men. Then it's keeping them company. Then," she shrugged, "then one day you wake up and realize you've become exactly what everyone said you were." Samuel shifted uncomfortably. He had wondered, though he wouldn't have asked. "So you decided to trick some poor fool into marrying you?" Fire flashed in her eyes. "I decided to try for something better. Is that so wrong? You wanted a wife. I wanted a different life. Why does it matter what I was before?" "Because you lied. Because you made me a laughingstock. And that's what really bothers you, isn't it? Not what I am, but what people think." She dried her hands on her apron, movements sharp with anger. Tell me, Mr. McKenna, what did you want from a mail-order bride? Someone to cook your meals, wash your clothes, warm your bed? I can do all that. Or did you want someone to make you look respectable in town? Because if that's all you wanted, you should have ordered a decoration, not a wife. Her words stung because they held truth. He had wanted respectability, the approval of his neighbors, a proper wife to complete the picture of his success. You don't understand. I understand plenty. You think you're the only one who's ever been judged, the only one who's had people whisper when you pass. She untied her apron with quick, angry motions. At least your reputation was earned through honest work. Mine was decided the first time I walked into the garter, before I'd done anything more than pour whiskey. The lamp flame flickered, sending shadows dancing across her face. Samuel saw tears gathering in her eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. "I'll leave in the morning," she said quietly. "You can tell everyone I ran off in the night. Save what's left of your good name." She turned toward the bedroom, but Samuel found himself speaking before he could think better of it. "Where would you go?" She paused in the doorway. "Does it matter?" He thought of the dusty town, the harsh faces, the life she'd tried so desperately to escape. Thought of his own winters alone, the empty chair, the silence that pressed in from all sides. Maybe it does. She looked back at him, hope and suspicion warring in her expression. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by his inability to articulate what he barely understood himself. "I'm saying it's late. We're both tired, and the world will still be there in the morning. We'll figure it out then." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good night, Mr. McKenna." "Samuel," he said. "My name is Samuel." "Good night, Samuel." The bedroom door closed softly behind her. Samuel sat alone at the table, listening to the night sounds of the prairie coyotes howling in the distance, wind rattling the windows, the old cabin settling on its foundation. In the bedroom, he could hear Lily moving about, then the creak of the bed ropes as she settled for the night. He thought about tomorrow, about the decisions that would have to be made. The sensible thing would be to take her back to town, weather the gossip, and try again with a real mail-order bride. But something held him back. Maybe the memory of her standing alone against the town's judgment. Maybe the simple meal she'd made from nothing. Maybe just the fact that for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't alone in his cabin, banking the fire in the stove. Samuel made himself a pallet on the floor near the hearth. The boards were hard beneath his blankets, and he knew he'd feel it come morning. But as he lay there in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sound of another person's breathing through the thin walls, he found himself thinking not of what he'd lost today, but of what, perhaps, he might have found. Samuel woke before dawn, his back aching from the hard floor. For a moment, he forgot why he wasn't in his bed. Then memory crashed over him like cold water. The woman, Lily, in his bedroom, in his home. He rose quietly, joints protesting, and stoked the stove back to life. Through the window, the eastern skies showed the faintest hint of gray. Another day without rain, by the look of it. He'd need to move the cattle to the north pasture where the creek still held some water, mend the fence where the posts had worked loose, check on the pregnant heifer that had been acting poorly. The bedroom door creaked open. Lily emerged, fully dressed in a simple brown work dress he hadn't seen before, her hair pinned back severely, without the evening shadows. He could see the fatigue etched in her face, but also a determined set to her jaw. "Morning," she said quietly. "Morning." He gestured awkwardly at the stove. "Coffee will be ready soon. I'll see to breakfast." She moved past him to investigate the pantry again, their bodies carefully not touching in the small space. Samuel escaped outside to tend the animals, grateful for the familiar routine. The horses nickered for their grain. The chickens pecked around his feet searching for scraps. The milk cow lowed plaintively. Everything normal except for the woman in his kitchen. When he returned, carrying a pail of fresh milk, the cabin smelled of biscuits baking. Lily had somehow coaxed his temperamental stove into cooperation. producing golden brown biscuits that put his usual burnt efforts to shame. She'd also found the preserves he'd forgotten about, purchased from Mrs. Morrison months ago and shoved to the back of a shelf. "Thought you might be hungry after sleeping on the floor," she said, not looking at him as she set out plates. They ate without conversation, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. Samuel noticed how she ate carefully, sparingly, as if unsure there would be more later. When they finished, she immediately began clearing dishes. "You don't have to," he began. "Yes, I do." She pumped water into the wash basin with practiced efficiency. "If I'm staying even one more day, I'll earn my keep. I won't be beholden." Samuel understood that pride, recognized it as kin to his own. "All right then. You want to earn your keep. There's plenty of work needs doing." He showed her the vegetable garden, or what remained of it. The drought had killed most everything, but she knelt in the dirt, examining the withered plants with surprising knowledge. "These tomatoes might survive if we shade them," she said, fingering a yellowed leaf. "And look, the potatoes are still growing underground. My mother had a garden back in Ohio. I helped her tend it." It was the first glimpse she'd given of the girl she'd been before. Samuel found himself curious despite his resolve to maintain distance. What else did she grow? "Oh, everything. Beans, squash, herbs for cooking and medicine. Papa used to say she could make flowers bloom in a desert." Her voice softened with memory, then hardened again. That was before the fever took them both. They worked through the morning, Lily proving herself surprisingly capable. She helped him rig a makeshift shade for the surviving plants, hauled water from the well without complaint, even helped him patch a hole in the chicken coop where something had been trying to get at the hens. The sun climbed higher, brutal in the cloudless sky. Samuel noticed Lily's face flushing, sweat soaking through her dress. "That's enough for now," he said. "Heat's too much midday." She straightened, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You're not used to this kind of work in this kind of heat. Come on." Inside, she drank deeply from the water bucket, then surprised him by laughing. "What?" "Just thinking what the ladies in town would say if they could see me now. Lily Thorne, grubbing in the dirt like a proper farm wife." The laughter had a bitter edge. "Though I suppose I'll never be proper in their eyes. Will I?" Samuel didn't answer because they both knew the truth. Instead, he said, "I need to check the cattle this afternoon, move them to better grazing. I'll come with you." He started to protest, then saw the stubborn set of her mouth. "Can you ride?" "Well enough." He saddled his mare and the older, gentler gelding he kept for pack work. Lily swung into the saddle with more grace than he'd expected, adjusting her skirts with practiced movements. They rode north, following a track worn by years of cattle drives. The land stretched endlessly, brown grass rippling like a dry sea. Lily kept pace without complaint, though he could see her shifting in the saddle, unused to long rides. The cattle were scattered across a wide area, heads down, searching for any edible grass. Samuel counted quickly, all 20 head accounted for, plus the pregnant heifer looking no worse than yesterday. "Is this all you have?" Lily asked. "Started with 5, built up over the years, lost some to winter, some to drought, but these are good stock, hardy." He pointed to a massive bull drowsing in the shade of a scraggly tree. "That's Caesar. Bought him off a Mexican trader 2 years back. Best investment I ever made." Why Caesar? Seemed like he needed a grand name to match his opinion of himself. She smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing the girl she might have been in another life. "My father would have liked that. He was always giving things fancy names. Called our old milk cow Cleopatra." They drove the cattle slowly toward the creek, dust rising in clouds around them. Lily proved useful, instinctively understanding how to position herself to keep the beasts moving. When one young steer tried to break away, she wheeled her horse neatly to turn it back. "You've done this before," Samuel said. Surprised. "No, but I've dealt with stubborn males my whole life. Cattle can't be that different." The words were light, but something in her tone made him wince. At the creek, while the cattle drank, they sat in the shade of some cottonwoods. Samuel passed her the canteen, watching as she drank. "Why ranching?" she asked suddenly. "You could have stayed wherever you came from, done something easier." "Nothing easy is worth doing." He took the canteen back, considering how much to share. "My family had a farm in Missouri, good land, established, but it was my older brother's to inherit. I wanted something that was mine, built by my own hands. So you came here, to the middle of nowhere. It's not nowhere, it's home." He gestured at the landscape. "Most folks see emptiness. I see possibility. Every fence I build, every calf that's born, every season survived. That's progress. That's building something from nothing." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I understand that feeling, wanting to build something different from what you were given." They sat in companionable silence, watching the cattle wade into the shallow water. The pregnant heifer stood apart, sides bulging, occasionally shifting with discomfort. "She's close," Lily observed. "Few more days, I reckon. Hope she doesn't have trouble. Lost one last year because I couldn't turn the calf in time. My mother helped birth babies sometimes, when the midwife couldn't come. She showed me things." Lily trailed off, then shrugged. "Probably not the same with cattle. Might be surprised. Life coming into the world is life, regardless." The afternoon wore on as they moved the herd to the north pasture, where the grass was marginally better. By the time they headed back, the sun was angling low, painting the mountains purple and gold. Lily rode quietly, fatigue evident in how she held herself. But when they crested the last hill and the cabin came into view, she straightened. "It looks different from up here," she said. "How so?" "This morning I saw a shack in the middle of nothing. Now I see." She paused, searching for words. "I see what you've built, the order of it. Cabin here, barn there, corrals placed just so. Everything with a purpose." Samuel felt an unexpected warmth at her observation. Catherine, the fictional bride from Philadelphia, would never have understood that. Would have seen only what was lacking, not what had been achieved. Back at the cabin, while Lily prepared supper from their meager supplies, Samuel tended to evening chores. The familiar rhythm soothed him, but he found himself hurrying through tasks that usually took twice as long. The pull of the lit window, of another human presence, was stronger than he'd expected. Inside, Lily had transformed their simple meal into something almost festive. She'd picked some wild herbs during their ride, seasoning the beans with flavors he couldn't identify, but that made his mouth water. She'd even made a simple dessert from cornmeal and the last of the preserves. "Where'd you learn to make do like this?" he asked, savoring food that actually tasted like something. "The garter paid wages, but not much after room and other expenses. You learn to stretch what you have." She pushed food around her plate. "And before that, after my parents died, there were lean times." They finished eating as darkness fell complete outside. The lamp cast a warm circle of light, holding back the vast prairie night. Samuel found himself reluctant to break the strange peace that had settled over them. "I should ask," Lily said quietly, "what you've decided. About tomorrow." The question he'd been avoiding all day. Samuel stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers. "I've been thinking on it. And I don't know. This isn't what I planned. You're not—" He stopped, seeing hurt flash across her face. "Not the respectable bride you paid for. I know." She stood abruptly, began clearing dishes with sharp movements. "I said I'd leave tomorrow. I meant it." "Where?" The same question as last night, but weighted differently now after a day spent working beside her. "There's always another town, another establishment. They're all the same in the end." Something in her voice, a deadness that hadn't been there before, made him stand. "Lily." She stopped but didn't turn. "What?" "Today, working with you. You did good, real good, better than I expected. but not good enough to overcome what I am. That's not... He struggled for words. It's not that simple. She turned then, eyes bright with unshed tears. Isn't it? I'm a fallen woman. Mr. McKenna. That's all anyone will ever see. You can't make me respectable by putting me in a work dress and teaching me to herd cattle. Maybe not. But maybe respectability isn't the only thing that matters. Easy for you to say. You have it. You've earned it through honest work. You don't know what it's like to lose it and know you can never get it back. He thought of the town's whispers, the looks that would follow him now. After today, I might have some idea. She laughed bitterly. It's not the same. You're still Samuel McKenna, honest rancher who got tricked. I'll always be Lily Thorne, the woman who sold herself. The crude truth hung between them. Samuel searched for something to say, some comfort to offer, but came up empty, because she was right. The world would always judge her more harshly than him. I'm tired, she said finally. Thank you for today, for letting me pretend, just for a day, that I could be something else. She retreated to the bedroom, leaving Samuel alone with the dying fire and his churning thoughts. He made his pallet again, but sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily working in the garden, riding beside him, making magic from simple ingredients. Saw her smile when he told her about Caesar. Saw the hurt in her eyes when reminded of what she could never be. Near midnight, he heard movement from the bedroom. The door opened quietly, and Lily emerged, wrapped in a shawl. Can't sleep either, he asked softly. She startled, then shook her head. Too much thinking. I know the feeling. She moved to the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. It's so quiet here. In town, there's always noise, music, laughter, fighting. But here, just the wind and the coyotes. Does it bother you, the quiet? No, it's peaceful, like the world's taking a breath. She wrapped the shawl tighter. I used to dream about quiet like this. A place where nobody knew my name or my shame, where I could just be. Samuel rose from his pallet, joints stiff, and joined her at the window. They stood side by side, not touching, watching the night. Maybe, he said slowly. That's what this could be, a place to just be. She turned to look at him, hope and doubt warring in her expression. What are you saying? I'm saying I need help here, real help. The drought's getting worse. Winter's coming, and one man can only do so much. You worked hard today, harder than I expected. You've got skills I didn't count on. Samuel, I'm not saying it would be easy. The town will talk. Hell, they'll do more than talk. But out here, it's just the land and the work and what we make of it. And what would we be making? You didn't get the wife you wanted. I can't be her, that innocent girl from Philadelphia who never existed? No, he agreed. But maybe that's not what I need. Maybe I need someone who knows about surviving, about making do, about facing the world's judgment and keeping on anyway. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silver in the starlight. You don't know what you're offering. The talk will be bad. Your reputation will survive or it won't, but at least I'll have help bringing in the harvest. Such as it is, help with the calving, the garden, all of it. Is that all you're offering? A job as your ranch hand? He met her eyes steadily. I'm offering what I can, a home, work, respect within these walls. What grows from that? We'll see. But it starts with deciding you're worth more than what the town says you are. Question is, do you believe that? She was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, so softly, he almost missed it. I'd like to try. Then stay. We'll face whatever comes together. She nodded, unable to speak further. They stood at the window a while longer, watching stars wheel overhead, each lost in thoughts of what tomorrow might bring. The future stretched uncertain before them, full of challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But for tonight, in the quiet of the cabin, two lonely souls had found a fragile connection and, perhaps, just perhaps, a chance at something neither had dared hope for. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm of shared work and careful distance. Samuel and Lily fell into a routine. She took over the cooking and household tasks while helping with the lighter ranch work. He handled the heavy labor while teaching her the ways of cattle and weather and survival on the prairie. They were polite, respectful, two people learning to exist in the same space without quite knowing what they were to each other. The town had been mercifully absent from their lives, but Samuel knew it couldn't last. He needed supplies, flour, coffee, salt, medicine for the cattle. He'd stretched what they had as far as possible, but winter preparations couldn't wait any longer. "I'm going to town tomorrow," he announced over dinner, the words dropping like stones in still water. Lily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh, need supplies. Can't put it off anymore." "Of course." She set down her fork carefully. "I'll make a list of what we need from the household goods. You could come with me." The offer surprised them both. Lily looked up, searching his face. That wouldn't be wise. Maybe not, but hiding out here isn't the answer either, sooner or later. Sooner or later doesn't have to be tomorrow. She rose, began clearing dishes with quick, nervous movements. "You go. I'll tend things here." Samuel wanted to argue, but recognized the fear in her eyes. The same fear he felt at the thought of facing the town's judgment. "All right, but we can't avoid them forever." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Just not yet." The next morning, Samuel hitched the wagon early, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. Lily handed him the list she'd made, her handwriting surprisingly elegant. "Be careful," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "It's just town. Lily, I've faced worse." "Have you?" She looked at him then, and he saw she understood what he was about to endure. The ride to Millfield seemed shorter than usual, probably because he dreaded arrival. As the buildings came into view, Samuel straightened his shoulders, set his jaw. He'd done nothing wrong. He'd taken in a woman who needed help, given her honest work. That's what he'd tell himself. Anyway, he stopped first at Morrison's general store, knowing it would be the worst, but wanting to get it over with. The usual collection of townspeople loitered on the porch, their conversation dying as he pulled up. Well, Walt the barber said loudly. "Look who's come to town. Surprised you'd show your face." "McKenna." Samuel climbed down from the wagon, movements deliberate. "Got business to tend. Walt, same as any man. Any decent man, maybe." Someone muttered. Inside the store, "Mrs." Morrison's greeting was ice cold. "Mr. McKenna. Haven't seen you in some weeks. Been busy with the ranch." He handed her his list, watching her purse her lips as she read it. "That's quite a lot of supplies. Feeding 2 mouths now." "Are we?" "My business. Mrs. Morrison." She sniffed. "When you bring scandal to our town, it becomes everyone's business." But she began gathering his goods, probably unwilling to turn away the money. As she worked, other customers entered, each one staring at Samuel with mixtures of curiosity, disgust, and pity. He endured it all, face impassive, though inside he burned with anger and shame. "Hear you're keeping that woman out at your place," Jake Patterson said, not bothering to lower his voice. "That true?" "Miss Thorne is working as my housekeeper," Samuel said evenly. "Nothing improper about it." Jake laughed uglily. "Housekeeper. That what they're calling it now." Samuel's fists clenched, but he forced them to relax. Fighting would only make things worse. "That's $32. "Mrs." Morrison announced, her tone suggesting she'd overcharged and dared him to complain. Samuel paid without argument, began loading supplies into his wagon. He was almost finished when hoofbeats thundered down Main Street. 3 riders pulled up hard. Dust-billowing, rough-looking men Samuel recognized as regulars from the Crimson Garter. The leader, a gambling man named Cole Stratton, dismounted with theatrical flair. He was everything Samuel wasn't, smooth-talking, well-dressed despite the dust, comfortable with violence in a way that showed in every movement. "McKenna," Stratton said, smiling without warmth. "Been meaning to pay you a visit." "No need," Samuel said. continuing to load his wagon. "Oh, but there is." Stratton moved closer, his companions flanking him. "See, you've got something that belongs to me. Nothing of yours at my place. That's where you're wrong." Stratton's smile widened. "Lily Thorne owes me money. Considerable money. She ran out on that debt when she took up with you." Samuel straightened slowly. "How much?" $200, plus interest. It was a fortune, more than Samuel cleared in a good year. "She doesn't have that kind of money." "No, but you do. Got this ranch, cattle, all of it." Stratton pulled out a cigar, lit it with deliberate casualness. "Way I see it, you took on her debts when you took her in? Way I see it, you're trying to run a confidence game." Stratton's eyes hardened. "Calling me a liar? Rancher?" The crowd on Morrison's porch had grown, everyone sensing trouble. Samuel felt the weight of their stares. Their eagerness to see him brought lower. "I'm saying any business between you and Miss Thorne is just that. Between you two, got nothing to do with me. She's living under your roof, eating at your table, warming your bed." Samuel moved before thought, his fist connecting with Stratton's jaw. The gambler went down hard, cigar flying. His companions reached for their guns, but Samuel already had his hand on his own Colt. "No need for that, boys." Sheriff Hayes appeared, apparently drawn by the commotion. "What's the trouble here?" Stratton got to his feet, rubbing his jaw. "McKenna assaulted me, Sheriff. These good people saw it. After you insulted a lady." Samuel said. "Lady?" Stratton laughed. "That's rich. Lily Thorne's no lady, and everyone knows it." "She is in my house," Samuel said quietly, dangerously. Sheriff Hayes stepped between them. "Enough, Stratton. You have legitimate business with McKenna? He owes me money, $200. "I owe him nothing," Samuel countered. "He's trying to collect a debt that may or may not exist from someone else." The sheriff considered. "Without proof of debt transfer, I can't see how McKenna's responsible for Miss Thorne's obligations, but assault's another matter. I'll press charges," Stratton said immediately. "Then we'll have a hearing. Judge comes through next Tuesday. Until then, both of you stay clear of each other." The sheriff looked at Samuel. "Might be best if you finished your business and headed home." Samuel nodded tightly, turned back to his wagon. But Stratton wasn't finished. "This isn't over, McKenna, one way or another. I'll collect what's owed, and if you're smart, you'll send Lily back where she belongs before someone gets hurt." "That sounds like a threat," Sheriff Hayes said mildly. "Just friendly advice." Stratton remounted, tipped his hat mockingly. "See you Tuesday, Rancher." They rode off in another cloud of dust. Samuel finished loading his supplies under the weight of dozens of stairs, then climbed onto his wagon seat. "Samuel," a soft voice called. He turned to see Mrs. Peterson, the preacher's wife, approaching hesitantly. That is, some of us want you to know we don't approve of violence. Perhaps if you were to repent, send that woman away." "Good day, Mrs. Peterson," Samuel said firmly, and drove out of town. The ride home seemed endless. His knuckles throbbed where they'd connected with Stratton's jaw, but that pain was nothing compared to the turmoil in his mind. $200. A court hearing. The town's hatred was no longer just whispers and cold shoulders. Now it had taken physical form. Lily was in the garden when he returned, kneeling among the vegetables they'd coaxed back to life. She stood as he approached, took one look at his face, and paled. "What happened?" "Cole Stratton happened." Her face went white. "Oh, God. Samuel, I'm sorry. I should have told you. $200. Lily? Is it real?" She sank onto the porch step. "It started as 50. Honest debt, I borrowed to send money to a friend in trouble, but the interest, Cole charges 20% a month. When I couldn't pay, it grew. Then there were fees, penalties." She buried her face in her hands. "I thought if I disappeared, he'd write it off." "But he didn't. No." Her voice was muffled. "Samuel, I'll leave. Tonight, I'll go back. Work it off somehow. No. The word came out harsher than intended. You're not going back to that. She looked up, tears streaming. But the hearing, your reputation, already ruined, according to the town. He sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. Might as well be hanged for a sheep as a lamb. This is my fault, all of it. You didn't throw the punch that's got me up before the judge. But you wouldn't have if Stratton hadn't insulted you. My choice, Lily, my fist. They sat in silence as the sun began its descent. Samuel's mind churned through possibilities. None of them good. He had some money saved, but nowhere near $200. And even if he paid, what would stop Stratton from inventing more debts? There's something else, Lily said quietly. About Cole. He thought he owned me. Not just the debt, but me. When I left, it wasn't just about the money. It was about defying him. Samuel understood then. This wasn't about debt at all. It was about possession, control, a man's wounded pride. He'll keep coming. Yes. Then we'd better be ready. She looked at him in surprise. You're under my protection now. That means something, even if the town doesn't think so. Samuel. Fresh tears spilled. I've brought you nothing but trouble. You've brought more than that. He thought of the past 3 weeks. Meals that tasted like food instead of survival. Conversation in the evenings. Someone to share the small victories and defeats of ranch life. House hasn't been this clean since I built it. Garden's coming back, and that heifer's going to calve any day. Be good to have help when she does. A watery laugh escaped her. You're worried about a cow at a time like this? Life goes on. Lily, troubles come and go, but the work remains. Land doesn't care about town gossip or Cole Stratton's threats. It just needs tending. She wiped her eyes. How can you be so calm? Not calm, just practical. We'll face the hearing. Deal with whatever comes. But right now, we've got supplies to unload and supper to make. They worked together, putting away goods, preparing the evening meal. But Samuel caught Lily glancing toward town, fear shadowing her features. He'd protected her today, but they both knew it was only the beginning. That night, as they sat by the fire, Lily spoke into the quiet. I was 17 when I met him. Cole, he seemed so sophisticated, so kind, helped me when I had nowhere else to turn. It wasn't until later I realized kindness was just another trap. Samuel listened without comment. Understanding this was something she needed to say. He never forced anything. Didn't have to, just made it clear that refusing him meant losing his protection, being thrown out, and by then, I'd already been marked. No respectable place would hire me. She stared into the flames. You get tired of fighting after a while. Easier to just accept what you are. You're not that anymore. Aren't I? The whole town thinks. The town's wrong. He met her eyes across the fire. I've watched you these weeks. You work hard. You're smart. You're kind to the animals. You're not what they say you are. You're the only one who thinks so. Then I'll have to think it loud enough for both of us. She smiled then. Sad, but genuine. You're a good man. Samuel McKenna. Better than I deserve. Don't say that. It's true, but maybe that's why I'll fight so hard to prove you're not wrong about me. She stood, moving toward the bedroom. Good night, Samuel. Good night, Lily. After she'd gone, Samuel remained by the dying fire. Planning. The hearing was Tuesday. He had 4 days to prepare, to figure out how to protect Lily from Stratton's games. 4 days to decide if he was really ready to stake everything on a woman the whole world said wasn't worth saving. Outside, a coyote howled, answered by another. The night pressed in, full of unseen dangers. But inside the cabin, lamplight held the darkness at bay, and Samuel McKenna made his choice. Come what may, he wouldn't abandon Lily Thorne. Not to Stratton, not to the town's judgment, not to the past that haunted her. Sometimes, he thought, a man had to decide what mattered more, what people said was right, or what he knew in his bones to be true. And the truth was, in 3 short weeks. Lily had brought something to his life he hadn't even known was missing. He'd be damned if he'd let Cole Stratton or anyone else take that away. Winter arrived early that year, creeping down from the mountains like a gray wolf stalking prey. By late October, frost silvered the grass each morning, and Samuel could see his breath as he worked. The weather turned brutal just days after the hearing, where Judge Morrison had fined Samuel $10 for assault but dismissed Stratton's debt claims for lack of evidence. It was a small victory, but Samuel knew it wouldn't be the end of their troubles. The first real storm hit in November, 3 feet of snow falling in 2 days. Samuel had seen it coming in the way the cattle bunched together, the way the air felt heavy and still. He and Lily worked frantically to prepare, bringing the cattle closer to the ranch, stacking extra wood, securing loose boards on the barn. "This'll be a bad one," he told her as they watched the sky turn the color of old lead. She pulled her shawl tighter, a woolen one he'd bought her in town despite her protests about the expense. "How can you tell? Bones ache, animals are skittish, and look there," he pointed to the mountains, now invisible behind a wall of white. "When you can't see the peaks, storm's already on its way." They barely made it inside before the blizzard struck. Wind howled like a living thing, rattling windows and finding every crack in the walls. Snow piled against the door until they couldn't open it, turning the cabin into a cave of lamplight and warmth. "We're trapped," Lily said, peering out the window at the white wall of storm. "Got everything we need right here," Samuel assured her. "Wood, food, water. Just have to wait it out." But as the days passed and the storm showed no signs of breaking, their situation grew more serious. The woodpile by the stove dwindled. They rationed their food carefully, but Samuel worried about the cattle, about the pregnant heifer especially. No way to check on them in this weather. On the 3rd night, with the wind screaming like demons, Lily surprised him by pulling out a small leather journal. "What's that?" he asked from his usual spot on the floor. "My mother's recipes. One of the few things I kept." She opened it carefully, revealing pages covered in faded handwriting. "Thought maybe I could figure out how to make our supplies stretch further." They spent the evening going through the journal together, Lily sharing memories of her mother's kitchen, the meals they'd made together before the fever changed everything. It was the most she'd ever talked about her past, and Samuel found himself sharing his own memories. His mother's cornbread, the apple pie she made every Sunday. "Listen to us," Lily said with a soft laugh. "Talking about food when we're down to beans and salt pork. Nothing wrong with dreaming. When this storm breaks and we get to town, I'll buy flour and sugar. You can make some of these recipes. If we get to town," she said quietly, watching the snow pile higher against the window. "We will. I've survived worse storms than this." "Alone?" "Yes," he admitted. "But it's easier with company." She smiled at that, the firelight softening her features. 3 months of good food and honest work had changed her. Her face had filled out, lost the hard edges. Her hands, once soft despite her profession, now showed calluses from garden work and daily chores. She looked healthy, content, even— "Samuel," she said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. That first day, when I stepped off the stage, why didn't you just let the sheriff send me away? It would have been so much easier for you." He considered the question, poking at the fire to buy time. "I've asked myself that 100 times. Best answer I can give is, I saw someone fighting to change their life. Figured that deserved a chance. Even though I lied? Maybe because you lied, showed how desperate you were to leave that life behind." She closed the journal carefully. "I never thanked you properly for that chance. You thank me every day, every meal cooked, every chore done, every time you stand up to the town's judgment without breaking. That's thanks enough." The wind gusted particularly hard, and something crashed outside, probably a tree branch or loose board. Lily jumped, then laughed nervously. "Will the roof hold?" "Built it myself. It'll hold." But Samuel moved to check the supports anyway, running his hand along the beams. As he did, he noticed Lily shivering despite the fire. "You're cold." "I'm fine." "No, you're not. Here." He grabbed his extra blanket from his makeshift bed. "Take this. Then you'll be cold." "I'm used to it." She took the blanket reluctantly, wrapping it around herself. "This is ridiculous. We're two adults, and you've been sleeping on the floor for 3 months. Your back must be killing you." "I manage." "Well, I won't have you freezing to death out of some misguided sense of propriety." She stood, blanket clutched around her. "The bed's big enough to share if we're careful. And before you object, remember that staying warm is about survival, not scandal." Samuel felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the fire. "Lily, that's not proper. Nothing about our situation is proper, but I'd rather be improper and alive than proper and frozen." She had a point, though Samuel's sense of honor warred with practicality. The floor was miserable in this cold, and they did need to conserve warmth. "Just for tonight," he said finally, "till the worst of the storm passes." They prepared for bed awkwardly, both hyper-aware of the other. Samuel kept his clothes on, as did Lily, and they lay stiffly on opposite sides of the bed, the space between them feeling like a chasm despite the narrow mattress. "This is silly," Lily said into the darkness. "We're acting like children. Just trying to preserve your reputation." "What's left of it?" "My reputation was gone the day I walked into the Crimson Garter. You're the one with something to lose." "Already lost it, according to the town." "No," she said firmly. "You're still a good man in their eyes. Misguided, maybe. Foolish, certainly. But good. That's why they're so upset. They expect better from you." They lay in silence, listening to the storm rage. Gradually, the awkwardness faded, replaced by simple gratitude for shared warmth. Samuel found himself relaxing, aware of Lily's presence but no longer tense about it. "Tell me about winter here," she said quietly. What should I expect? So he told her about blizzards that lasted weeks, about temperatures so cold that water froze before it hit the ground, about losing cattle to wolves and weather, about the terrible isolation when snow cut off all routes to town, but also about the beauty of it, morning sun on fresh snow, the way ice crystals formed on windows like God's own artwork, the satisfaction of keeping stock alive through the worst nature could offer. "You make it sound almost magical," she murmured, drowsiness creeping into her voice. "It is, in its way. Hard and dangerous, but beautiful too. Like most things worth having." "Like trust," she said, so softly he almost missed it. "Hard to build, dangerous to give, but beautiful when you find it." Samuel lay awake long after her breathing evened into sleep, thinking about trust and chances and the strange turns life took. Outside, the storm began to slacken, though snow still fell steadily. Tomorrow they'd dig out, check the cattle, return to the careful distance they maintained during daylight. But tonight, in the warm darkness with the storm holding the world at bay, something had shifted between them. Not passion. That would be too simple, too expected. This was deeper, the recognition of two souls choosing to survive together rather than apart. When morning came, pale and still through the frosted windows, they found the world transformed. Snow had drifted higher than the windows on the north side, turning the landscape into something alien and beautiful. Samuel dressed quickly and grabbed the shovel. "I'll dig us out. Check on the stock," he said, not quite meeting Lily's eyes in the morning light. "I'll get breakfast started. You'll need something hot." They worked through the morning, Samuel breaking a path to the barn while Lily kept the fire going and food ready. The cattle had survived, huddled together in the shelter of the barn, though they were hungry and vocal about it. The pregnant heifer looked distressed, sides heaving, and Samuel knew her time was close. By afternoon, they'd established a routine for storm survival. Samuel would fight his way to the barn twice a day to feed and water the stock. Lily maintained the household, keeping the fire constant and making their supplies stretch with creativity that amazed him. Evenings, they'd share the bed for warmth, talking in the darkness about everything and nothing. The storm lasted 8 days, 8 days cut off from the world, dependent only on each other. By the time it finally broke, leaving behind a world of crystalline beauty and deadly cold, something fundamental had changed between them. The careful formality was gone, replaced by the easy partnership of people who'd faced hardship together and emerged stronger. "Look," Lily called from the window on the 9th morning. "Sun." Samuel joined her, seeing the landscape glitter like diamond dust. The temperature had plummeted with the clearing skies, but at least they could move freely again. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "And dangerous. This cold'll kill faster than the storm would have. Then we'd better keep each other warm," she said, and there was something in her tone that made him look at her sharply. But she was already moving away, bustling about her morning chores. That afternoon, as Samuel was returning from feeding the cattle, he heard Lily scream. He ran, slipping on ice, heart pounding, found her outside the chicken coop, staring at carnage. Something had gotten in during the storm, fox or weasel, and killed half their laying hens. "Oh, Samuel, I'm so sorry," she said, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I should have checked." "Not your fault," he said firmly. "I should have secured the coop better." He surveyed the damage grimly. The loss of the hens meant no eggs through winter, one less source of food. What will we do? Make do, always have. But inside, he worried. The storm was just the beginning. 3 more months of winter stretched ahead, and their supplies were already running low. In past years, he'd simply tightened his belt and endured, but now he had Lily to think about. That night, as they prepared for bed, no longer pretending they'd sleep separately, Lily said quietly, "I have some money saved. Not much, but—" "No. Samuel, be practical. We need supplies. We'll manage without taking your money." "Our money," she corrected. "I'm not a guest anymore. Am I? What am I exactly?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Not wife, not employee, not exactly friend. Something undefined but essential. "You're my partner," he said finally. "In the work, the hardship, all of it. Then let me contribute what I can. Partners share burdens, don't they?" He wanted to refuse again, pride demanding he provide everything. But she was right. Pride was a luxury they couldn't afford this winter. "All right," he said quietly. "Partners." She smiled, the expression warming him more than any fire. "Good. Now come to bed before you freeze. I can hear your teeth chattering from here." As they settled for sleep, Lily curled naturally against his side, seeking warmth. Samuel tensed for a moment, then relaxed, accepting this new intimacy born of necessity and growing trust. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, and the temperature dropped further. But inside the small cabin, 2 people who'd started as strangers built their own warmth against the cold, unforgiving world. "We'll make it through," Lily murmured, already half asleep. "Yes," Samuel agreed, meaning more than just the winter. "We will." The wind picked up again, rattling the windows, promising more storms to come. But for now, they were safe, warm, and no longer alone. In a harsh land that forgave nothing, it was more than enough. It was everything. The night of the fire started like any other in that brutal winter. Samuel had just returned from the evening feeding, ice crystals in his beard, boots heavy with snow. Lily had supper waiting, thin soup stretched with roots they'd stored in the cellar, but hot and welcome after the bitter cold. "Heifer's getting close," he reported, warming his hands by the stove. "Tomorrow maybe, or the next day." "In this weather?" Lily frowned. "Will she be all right?" "Have to hope so. I'll bed her down in the warmest corner of the barn. Plenty of straw." They ate quietly, the comfortable silence of people who'd grown used to each other's rhythms. Outside, the wind had picked up again, not a storm but steady and bitter, driving temperatures even lower. It was past midnight when Samuel woke to the smell of smoke. For a moment, still drowsy, he thought the stove had backed up. Then he heard it, the crackling roar that every rancher feared more than wolves or weather. Fire! He shook Lily awake, already pulling on his boots. The barn! Through the window. Orange light flickered against the snow. Samuel's heart sank. The barn, the hay, the cattle, everything that kept them alive through winter. Stay here, he ordered, grabbing his coat. Like hell, Lily shot back, already dressing. You'll need help. They ran through the snow, the heat hitting them before they reached the structure. The whole north side was ablaze, flames eating through the dry wood like paper. The cattle were bellowing in terror. Trapped. The doors! Samuel ran for the main entrance, Lily beside him. Together they wrestled with the heavy bar, heat scorching their faces. The doors swung open and cattle poured out, wild-eyed and panicked, scattering into the night. The heifer! Lily pointed to the far corner where they'd penned the pregnant cow. Flames were already licking at the posts. Samuel didn't think, just plunged into the smoke-filled barn. His eyes streamed, lungs burning with each breath. The heifer was down, too frightened to move, sides heaving. He grabbed her rope, pulled with all his strength. She wouldn't budge. Then Lily was there, coughing but determined, adding her strength to his. Together, she gasped. On 3. They pulled in unison, and finally the heifer scrambled to her feet. Half dragging, half guiding. They got her through the doors just as a beam crashed down where they'd been standing. The feed! Samuel started back, but Lily grabbed his arm. No, it's too late! She was right. The flames had spread to the roof now, the whole structure beyond saving. They could only stand in the snow and watch months of work. Their winter feed supply go up in smoke. Other sounds penetrated Samuel's shock horses screaming. The small corral attached to the barn held his 2 saddle horses and the old plow horse. Without words, both rushed to the corral. The gate was already hot to the touch, but Samuel managed to wrench it open. The horses needed no encouragement, bolting into the darkness. What else? Lily shouted over the roar of flames. Nothing, just get back. They retreated to safe distance, watching helplessly as the barn collapsed in a shower of sparks. The fire lit up the night sky, surely visible for miles. In the morning, neighbors might come to help, but tonight they were alone with disaster. Samuel, Lily's voice was strange. He turned to see her staring at the house, where a figure stood silhouetted against the doorway. Cole Stratton stepped into the firelight, 2 of his men flanking him. Evening, folks. Saw you had some trouble. Thought we'd check on you. Samuel's fists clenched. You did this. Now that's a serious accusation. Stratton's smile was visible even in the flickering light. You got any proof? Witnesses? Or just the word of a bitter man who can't accept that accidents happen? Get off my land. Public-spirited citizens checking on a neighbor in distress. Sheriff would want us to help. Don't you think? Stratton's gaze found Lily. Hello, darlin'. Farm life treating you well. Better than you ever did, she said steadily. His smile faltered. You always did have a mouth on you. McCabe here thinks I should teach you some manners. One of his companions laughed. An ugly sound. Samuel stepped in front of Lily. Touch her and I'll kill you. Big words from a man who just lost everything. Stratton gestured at the burning ruins. No barn, no feed. Your cattle are scattered to hell and gone in this cold. Half will be dead by morning. You got nothing left to fight with. McKenna. I've got enough. Do you? Way I see it. You need help. Lucky for you. I'm a generous man. Willing to buy your place. Give you enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from here. Not interested. You will be, come morning, when you count what's left and realize you can't make it through winter. Stratton turned to Lily. Offer stands for you too, sweetheart. Your debt's cleared. Fresh start. All you have to do is come back where you belong. I know where I belong, Lily said. And it's not with you. Stratton's face hardened. Have it your way. But when you're starving come February, remember, I offered mercy. He tipped his hat mockingly. Enjoy your fire, folks. Stay warm. They mounted and rode off. leaving Samuel shaking with rage. Lily touched his arm. "Let them go. We have bigger problems." She was right. They spent the rest of the night trying to round up cattle, driving them into the small corral that had held the horses. By dawn, they'd found 12 of the 20 head. The rest were gone, dead, scattered, or stolen. The pregnant heifer they'd saved was in distress. Her labor started early by the trauma. "I can't lose her too," Samuel said desperately as the cow groaned and strained. "She's the future of the herd." "You won't." Lily knelt in the snow beside the heifer. "My mother taught me about birthing. Animals aren't so different from people when it comes down to it." For 2 hours they worked. Lily with a gentleness Samuel wouldn't have expected, talking softly to the frightened animal while guiding the calf into position. Samuel had seen plenty of calvings, but Lily's knowledge surprised him. She knew exactly where to push, how to ease the baby free when it finally came. The calf slid into the world as the sun rose, revealing the full devastation of the fire. The barn was gone, nothing left but smoking timbers and ash. Their winter feed, tools, tack all destroyed. But the calf was alive, struggling to its feet on wobbly legs while its mother lowed softly and began cleaning it. "It's a heifer," Lily said, tears mixing with the soot on her face. "A female. She'll grow your herd." Samuel looked at her, exhausted, filthy, kneeling in bloody snow, and felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. "You saved her. We saved her. Together." He helped her to her feet, and for a moment they stood close, holding each other up. Then reality crashed back. No barn meant no shelter for the animals. No feed meant they'd starve. No tools meant no way to rebuild. "What do we do now?" Lily asked quietly. Samuel surveyed the wreckage of his dreams. 7 years of work, gone in one night. Stratton was right, they couldn't make it through winter like this. "Samuel?" Lily's voice pulled him back. "Talk to me. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Stratton wins. Can't fight without resources. Can't keep you safe without—" "Stop." She faced him squarely, green eyes blazing. "You stop that right now. You think this is over? You think one fire ends everything? Look around. Lily, we've got nothing left. We've got the house. We've got 12 cattle and a new calf. We've got each other." She gripped his hands, her own still trembling from cold and exhaustion. "I've lost everything before, Samuel, more than once, but I'm still here, and now I've got something worth fighting for. Don't you dare give up on me now." "I'm not giving up on you. I'm trying to protect—" "I don't need protection. I need a partner who believes we can survive this." Her voice cracked. "Please, don't let him win. Not like this." Samuel looked at her soot-streaked face, saw the girl who'd stepped off that stage 4 months ago, defiant against the world's judgment. Saw the woman who'd worked beside him through storms and hardship. Saw someone who'd walked through fire, literally now, rather than abandon what they'd built together. "All right," he said roughly. "We fight, but I don't know how—" "First things first. We need shelter for the animals. The chicken coop's still standing. We can expand it, make it work temporarily. Then we figure out feed. Maybe the neighbors who think I'm harboring a—" He stopped, but she finished for him. "A whore. I know. But their Christian charity might override their judgment when they see what's happened. And if not—" She smiled grimly. "Then we find another way. We always do." They worked through the day, exhaustion forgotten in the face of necessity. The chickens were moved to the house, less than ideal, but they needed the coop for larger stock, using salvage boards and a tarp Samuel had stored in the root cellar. They created a makeshift shelter that would hold the most vulnerable animals. As the sun set on the longest day of Samuel's life, they stood together looking at their patched-together solutions. It wasn't much. It might not be enough, but it was a start. "I need to tell you something," Samuel said suddenly. "Last night, when I saw you run into that burning barn after me, nobody's ever risked themselves for me like that. You did it first. Ran in to save the heifer. That's different. That was my stock, my responsibility." "No," she said softly. "It wasn't different. Don't you understand yet? Your fights are my fights now. Your risks are mine. That's what partners do. He turned to face her fully, seeing past the soot and exhaustion to the woman beneath. Lily, Shh. She put a finger to his lips. I know. You don't have to say it. Not yet. We've got bigger things to worry about right now. But she leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her. And for a moment, the destroyed barn and scattered cattle and impossible winter ahead didn't matter. They had survived the fire. They had saved the heifer and her calf. They had each other. We'll rebuild, he said into her hair. Somehow. Yes, she agreed. We will. And Cole Stratton will learn that some things can't be burned down. Some things just come back stronger. As if in agreement, the new calf called out from the shelter, its voice thin but determined in the cold air, new life asserting itself despite everything. Samuel held Lily tighter, drawing strength from her faith, her refusal to surrender. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They'd need to beg, borrow, or trade for feed. Need to somehow rebuild before the worst of winter hit. Need to guard against whatever Stratton might try next. But tonight, standing in the ruins of his old life with Lily warm in his arms, Samuel felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Not for what was lost, but for what might still be built. Together. Word of the fire spread across the valley like the flames themselves had traveled on the wind. By the second day, neighbors began arriving, some out of genuine concern, others drawn by curiosity and the dark satisfaction of witnessing another's misfortune. The first to come were the Andersons from the neighboring ranch. Tom Anderson dismounted slowly, surveying the blackened ruins while his wife Martha remained in their wagon, lips pursed in disapproval. Samuel, Tom said, extending his hand. Heard about your troubles. That's a hard loss. We're managing, Samuel replied, aware of Martha's stare fixed on Lily, who was hauling water to the makeshift animal shelter. Are you now? Martha's voice carried clearly. Seems to me the Lord has a way of punishing those who stray from righteousness. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Martha, I'm only saying what everyone's thinking. Take up with a woman of ill repute, and trouble follows. She sniffed. Though I suppose we're commanded to show Christian charity, even to the fallen. Lily had stopped working, standing very still with the water bucket in her hands. Samuel saw her knuckles whiten around the handle. If you've come to gawk at our misfortune, Mrs. Anderson, you've seen it, Samuel said evenly. If you've come to help, we're grateful. If not, the road back to your place is the same way you came. Tom cleared his throat. We brought some hay. Not much, but it might see you through a few weeks. It was a generous offer, more than Samuel had expected. Thank you. Tom, what do you want for it? Nothing. It's the neighborly thing. Tom glanced at his wife, then back at Samuel. Though Martha has conditions. Which are? Martha leaned forward from the wagon seat. That woman doesn't set foot on our property. When you come to collect the hay, you come alone. We won't have her near our home or our daughters. The words hung in the cold air like icicles. Lily set down the bucket carefully and walked over. Her chin lifted despite the mud on her dress and the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Mrs. Anderson, she said quietly, I understand your concerns. You don't know me except by reputation, but I want you to know that I would never— I don't care to hear anything from you. Martha cut her off. The offer stands as I stated it. Take it or leave it. Samuel felt anger rise hot in his chest, but Lily touched his arm gently. Take it, she said. The animals need feed. Lily, take it, she repeated, then looked directly at Martha. Thank you for your charity, Mrs. Anderson. I pray you never find yourself in need of the same. Martha flushed, whether from anger or shame. Samuel couldn't tell. Tom quickly gave directions to where the hay was stored, then helped his wife turn the wagon around. As they left, Samuel heard Martha say, You see, bold as brass. No shame at all in these fallen women. She has more grace than you showed today. Samuel muttered, but only Lily was close enough to hear. More visitors came throughout the day, Some, like old Jim Fletcher, offered genuine help without conditions. A bag of grain here, some tools there. Others came to stare and whisper, to see for themselves how low Samuel McKenna had fallen. The worst was Reverend Peterson, arriving with a delegation of church ladies in the late afternoon. Samuel was struggling to repair the chicken coop when he saw them approaching, black clothes stark against the snow like a murder of crows. "Brother McKenna," the Reverend intoned, "we've come in your hour of need, Reverend." Samuel straightened, noticing how the church ladies arranged themselves to avoid looking directly at Lily, who was tending the pregnant heifer nearby. "This fire is a sign," Reverend Peterson continued, raising his voice as if preaching to a larger congregation. "A warning from the Almighty about the dangers of harboring sin." "Is that so?" Samuel kept his voice level. "And here I thought it was Cole Stratton with a torch. You have no proof of that," one of the church ladies said. "And really, Mr. McKenna, what did you expect? When you lie down with dogs, you rise with fleas, or burn in hellfire," another added, glancing meaningfully at the ruined barn. "However," the Reverend raised a hand for silence, "we are commanded to show mercy. The church has taken up a collection for you, Brother McKenna, enough to see you through the winter and perhaps start rebuilding." Hope flickered in Samuel's chest despite his anger. "That's generous." "There are conditions." Reverend Peterson's gaze shifted to Lily. "The woman must go. Repent of your association with her. Send her back where she belongs, and the church will embrace you again as a lost sheep returned to the fold. And if I don't, then you choose damnation, both in this life and the next." Samuel felt Lily moving beside him before he saw her. She walked forward steadily, stopping just out of reach of the delegation. "I'll go," she said quietly. "Lily, no. Listen to me." She turned to face him, and he saw tears standing in her eyes. "They're right about one thing. I brought this trouble to you. Your barn, your reputation, everything. If you leave, Stratton wins. They all win." Samuel moved to stand beside her, facing the church delegation. "Reverend, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept your conditions." Shocked murmurs from the church ladies. Reverend Peterson's face darkened. "You would choose this Jezebel over your own salvation? I'm choosing to stand by someone who's proven herself through hard work and loyalty. Someone who risked her life to save my stock last night while good Christian folk were safe in their beds." "She's bewitched you," one of the ladies whispered. "Led you astray with her wiles." Lily laughed bitterly. "Yes, my wiles. Mucking stalls, hauling water, birthing calves in the snow. How seductive." "Do not mock us, woman," the Reverend thundered. "You are an abomination, a stain upon—" "She's a human being," Samuel interrupted, his voice hard as winter ground. "Created by the same God you claim to serve, and if your Christianity requires throwing her to the wolves, then I want no part of it." "Then you are lost," Reverend Peterson said with finality. "Come, ladies, we'll waste no more time on those who choose damnation." They swept away in a rustle of black fabric and righteousness. Samuel watched them go, knowing he'd just burned another bridge, maybe the last one. "You shouldn't have done that," Lily said, her voice thick. "The money could have saved everything." "Not everything, not the things that matter." She looked at him wonderingly. "I'm not worth this, Samuel, not worth losing everything for. You don't get to decide what you're worth to me," he said roughly. "Now come on, we've got work to do if we're going to survive without their help." But that evening brought one more visitor, unexpected and alone. Samuel was feeding the horses when he heard the wagon approach. He tensed, expecting more judgment, but relaxed slightly when he recognized Dr. William Hartley from town. The doctor climbed down stiffly, medical bag in hand. "Evening, Samuel. Miss Thorne." "Doc." Samuel was wary. "Someone sick?" "Not yet, but winter has a way of changing that." The doctor looked around at their makeshift arrangements. "Heard about the fire. Also heard about the church's visit today. News travels fast. Always does." Doctor Hartley pulled out a pipe, took his time lighting it. "I've been doctoring in this valley for 20 years. Seen a lot of good Christian folk, as they style themselves. Also seen what they do when no one's watching. Your point? My point is that half the men condemning Miss Thorne have darkened the garter's door themselves. The other half would have if they had the courage. He puffed thoughtfully. Hypocrisy's an ugly disease, and this town's infected with it. Lily had approached quietly, drawn by the unexpected kindness in the doctor's tone. Why are you here, doctor? Hartley. Because I took an oath once, to do no harm and to help where I can. He reached into his wagon, pulled out a wooden crate. Medical supplies. You'll need them if you're going to make it through winter out here alone. Also got some preserved food my wife put up. She sends her regards. By the way, one of the few women in town who remembers Judge not lest ye be judged. Samuel's throat tightened. After the day's rejections, this simple kindness hit harder than the cruelty had. Doc, I can't pay. Didn't ask you to. The doctor looked directly at Lily. My daughter ran off 5 years ago. 16 years old. Full of dreams. Last letter I got, she was working in a house in Denver. Not the kind of work a father hopes for his child. Lily's hand went to her throat. I'm sorry. So am I. Sorry I couldn't protect her from whatever drove her to that life. Sorry this world is harder on women than men. Sorry that once a woman falls, everyone's more interested in keeping her down than helping her up. He knocked his pipe against the wagon wheel. But I can't help my Sarah. She won't let me, so maybe helping you balances the scales a little. He climbed back onto his wagon before they could respond. I'll check back in a few weeks. Try not to burn anything else down before then. As his wagon rolled away, Lily stood frozen. Then, suddenly, she was crying, great gulping sobs that shook her whole body. Samuel pulled her against him, holding tight while she wept out months of judgment and rejection and pain. It's all right, he murmured. Let it out. One person. She sobbed. One person in this whole town who sees me as human, besides you. That's 2 more than you had before. And Doc Hartley's good people. If he's on our side, others might follow. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. You really believe that? I believe people can surprise you. Look at us. Mail-order bride turns out to be a dance hall girl. Proper rancher decides to keep her anyway. If that's not surprising, I don't know what is. She laughed wetly. When you put it that way, it does sound like something out of a dime novel. Except in those, the barn doesn't burn down and the church ladies don't call you names. True. But in those, the hero also doesn't sleep on the floor for 4 months. I haven't been on the floor for weeks now, he pointed out. Only because I insisted, honestly, Samuel. Sometimes your propriety is worse than their judgment. They stood together in the gathering dusk. The ruined barn, a black skeleton against the sunset. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more tests of their resilience. But tonight, they had medical supplies, preserved food, and the knowledge that at least one person in town saw them as human beings deserving of dignity. We should bring the chickens in, Lily said practically. It's getting cold again. In a minute. Samuel kept his arm around her, drawing strength from her presence. Doc was right. You know, the world is harder on women. What you've survived, what you've overcome. I couldn't have done it. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I've had my pride bruised these past months. But you've had your very humanity questioned every single day. And you're still standing, still fighting, still finding grace to show to people who don't deserve it. She leaned into him. I'm standing because you're standing with me. That makes all the difference. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The temperature was dropping fast, and they had animals to tend, work to finish before full dark. But Samuel found himself reluctant to move, to break this moment of peace in their embattled life. Samuel? Lily's voice was soft. Whatever happens, I want you to know, these months with you have been the best of my life. Even with the fire and the judgment and everything, I've felt more myself here than I ever did before. You are yourself here. The real you. Not what the world tried to make you. And you, are you still yourself, After everything I've cost you? He thought about it. About the man he'd been before that day at the stage stop. Respectable, respected, but alone. Building a life that looked good from the outside but echoed with emptiness within. I'm more myself, he said finally. Turns out the man I thought I was supposed to be wasn't the man I actually am. And who are you actually? A man who chooses love over reputation, who'd rather stand with one good woman than have the approval of 100 hypocrites, who's learned that sometimes the best things come in unexpected packages. She turned in his arms, looking up at him in the dying light. Is that what this is? Love? The word hung between them, as clear and sharp as the winter air. Samuel felt his heart hammering, knew they stood at a precipice as dangerous as any fire. Yes, he said simply. That's what this is. She rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathless. Well then, she said, a smile playing at her lips. I guess we'd better survive this winter. Be ashamed to find love and lose it to Cole Stratton in cold weather. We'll survive, Samuel said with conviction. Together. They went to tend the animals then, working side by side as darkness fell complete. The barn was gone. The town had turned its back, and winter stretched ahead mercilessly. But in the small circle of their land, lit by lantern light and warmed by newfound certainty, Samuel McKenna and Lily Thorne faced the future without fear. They had each other. In the end, that was wealth enough. Spring came slowly to the Montana Territory that year, creeping down from the mountains like a cautious deer testing for danger. The snow retreated gradually, revealing the scars of winter-dead grass, scattered bones of cattle that hadn't survived, and always, the blackened remains of the barn. Samuel stood in the doorway of the cabin, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Behind him, he could hear Lily moving about, preparing breakfast. The domestic sounds that had once seemed foreign now formed the rhythm of his mornings. They had survived, barely. At times, there had been weeks when they'd lived on boiled wheat and hope, nights when the cold seemed determined to creep through every crack and steal their lives. But they had made it through. "Rider coming," Lily said, joining him at the door. Her hand found his naturally, fingers intertwining. Samuel squinted against the morning light. Single rider, moving fast. His free hand moved instinctively toward the rifle by the door, but as the rider drew closer, he relaxed. "It's Jim Fletcher." Old Jim pulled up hard. His horse lathered despite the cool morning. "Samuel, Miss Lily, you need to come to town. Right now." "What's wrong?" Samuel set down his mug, already reaching for his coat. "It's Stratton. He's called a town meeting. Says he's got proof you started the fire yourself, for insurance money. Says he's got witnesses." Lily's hand tightened in Samuel's. "That's insane. We don't even have insurance. Don't matter what's true," Jim said grimly. "He's got people stirred up. Sheriff's trying to keep order, but—" He shook his head. "You need to speak for yourselves, or they'll decide without you." Samuel looked at Lily. They'd avoided town all winter, making do with what they had, too proud to beg and too stubborn to leave. But this was different. This was their lives at stake. "We'll come," he said. They hitched the wagon quickly, Lily changing into her best dress, the brown work dress that had seen her through winter, mended and clean, but still showing wear. Samuel noticed her hands trembling as she pinned up her hair. "We knew this was coming," he said quietly. "Knowing and facing are different things." She squared her shoulders. "But I won't hide." Not anymore. The ride to town felt both endless and too quick. As they approached Millfield, they could see wagons and horses crowding the main street. It seemed the entire valley had turned out. The meeting was in the church, the only building large enough to hold everyone. As Samuel helped Lily down from the wagon, he felt the weight of 100 stares. Whispers followed them like a dust devil. "Chin up," he murmured. "We've done nothing wrong." Inside, the church was packed. Cole Stratton stood at the front, dressed in his finest gambler's clothes, looking every inch the respectable businessman. Sheriff Hayes stood to one side, hand resting on his pistol, while Reverend Peterson occupied the pulpit with obvious reluctance at his church being used for secular matters. "Ah," Stratton said as they entered. "The accused arrive." "Accused of what, exactly?" Samuel's voice carried clear and strong. "Arson, fraud. Attempting to defraud your neighbors by claiming I burned your barn when you did it yourself. That's a lie." "Is it?" Stratton produced a paper with a flourish. "I have here a sworn statement from someone who saw you near the barn just before the fire started. Someone whose word is unimpeachable." He handed the paper to Sheriff Hayes, who read it with deepening frown. "This is signed by Mrs. Anderson." Samuel felt the floor drop from under him. Tom Anderson's wife, the woman who'd grudgingly offered Hay with conditions. He found her in the crowd, saw her sitting rigid beside her husband, refusing to meet his eyes. "Mrs. Anderson," Sheriff Hayes said, "you'll need to speak to this." She stood slowly, clutching her Bible. "I saw him, Mr. McKenna, near the barn that night, moving furtively, like someone up to no good." "You saw me checking on my animals," Samuel said. "Like I did every night. I saw what I saw." She insisted, "And given the circumstances, the unnatural arrangement in that house, who knows what desperation might drive a man to do?" "Unnatural arrangement?" Lily stepped forward, and Samuel saw fire in her eyes. "You mean two people working together to survive? Two people who care for each other? I mean a fallen woman leading a good man astray." "Mrs." Anderson snapped, "everyone knows what you are. Lily Thorne, what you've done, how you've corrupted—" "Enough!" The voice came from an unexpected source, Doctor. Hartley, standing up in his pew. "Martha Anderson, you're bearing false witness, and you know it. How dare you?" "I dare because I was out that night too. My patient, the widow Johnson, was failing. I saw the fire start from her window." He looked directly at Stratton. "Saw 3 riders heading away from the McKenna place just as the flames took hold, moving fast, like men with guilt on their heels." A murmur ran through the crowd. Stratton's composure cracked slightly. "You're mistaken, Doc. Dark night, snow, full moon that night, clear as day." "Doctor," Hartley moved to the front of the church. "I know what I saw. Question is, why didn't I speak up sooner?" He looked around the packed church. "Because I was a coward. Because I thought someone else would do the right thing. Because I let my silence enable this persecution." "Even if that's true," Reverend Peterson interjected, "it doesn't change the fundamental issue. Mr. McKenna has been living in sin with this woman." "No." Samuel's voice cut through the murmur. "No, Reverend, I haven't." He took Lily's hand, pulled her to stand beside him. "But I aim to correct that oversight right now." He turned to face Lily, saw her eyes widen in shock. "Lily Thorne, you came into my life through deception. That's true, but you've stayed through honesty, hard work, and courage I've never seen matched. You've stood by me when the whole world said you should run. You've made my empty house a home and my cold life warm." He dropped to one knee, right there in front of God and everyone. "Will you marry me? Really marry me? Not as some mail-order arrangement or business deal, but as the woman I love and want to spend my life with?" The church erupted. Shouts of outrage from some, gasps from others. But Samuel kept his eyes on Lily, saw tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, Samuel, yes." He stood and kissed her, there in front of the whole town, claiming her as his own without shame or hesitation. "This is blasphemy," someone shouted. "This is love." Samuel shot back. "And if you can't tell the difference, that's your failing, not ours." Sheriff Hayes cleared his throat. "Well, this is irregular. But the matter at hand is the fire. The matter at hand is justice," a new voice said. Tom Anderson stood up, face red with emotion. "Martha, tell the truth. You weren't anywhere near the McKenna place that night. You were home with me, remember? You had one of your headaches." "Mrs." Anderson's face crumbled. He said it was for the good of the community, said that woman needed to be driven out before she corrupted others." Who said? Sheriff Hayes demanded. But everyone already knew. All eyes turned to Stratton, who had gone very still. You can't prove anything, he said coolly. Maybe not about the fire, Sheriff Hayes said, but suborning perjury? That I can prove, Mrs. Anderson. You'll need to come with me to make a new statement, a truthful one. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Stratton slipped out in the confusion. His men with him. Samuel heard later that they'd left town that very day, heading west to fresh territories and new schemes. But in that moment, Samuel cared about none of it. He stood with Lily in the middle of the church, holding her while she cried tears of joy and relief. Did you mean it? She asked. About marriage. Every word. Question is, will anyone in this town perform the ceremony? I will. Dr. Hartley approached, his wife beside him. I'm a justice of the peace as well as a doctor. Be honored to unite two people who've shown more grace under pressure than most folks manage in a lifetime. And so, on a spring morning in a church that had condemned them, Samuel McKenna married Lily Thorne. Not many stayed to witness. Jim Fletcher, the Hartleys. Surprisingly, Tom Anderson, though his wife had fled in shame, and a handful of others who decided that love mattered more than reputation. It wasn't the wedding either had imagined. Lily wore her simple brown dress. Samuel's best clothes still smelled faintly of smoke. There were no flowers, no celebration, no wedding feast. But when Dr. Hartley pronounced them husband and wife, when Samuel kissed his bride in the shaft of sunlight streaming through the church windows, he felt richer than any man had a right to be. They drove home as husband and wife, past the greening fields and swelling creeks. The burned barn still stood as a black reminder of the winter's trials. But already Samuel was making plans. They'd rebuild, better than before. The cattle were thriving on new grass. The garden Lily had tended so carefully was already showing green shoots. Mrs. McKenna, Samuel said, testing the words. How does it feel? Like coming home, Lily said softly. Like finding the place I was always meant to be. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Lily asked, Do you think they'll ever accept us? The town? Some will, some won't. Doc Hartley says attitudes change slowly, but they do change. Maybe we're part of that change. And if they don't, Samuel pulled her close, then we'll make our own world right here. We've got the land, the cattle, each other. That's more than most folks ever find. It's enough, Lily agreed. More than enough. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Samuel thought about the strange journey that had brought them here. A lonely rancher who'd ordered a bride from a catalog. A desperate woman who'd risked everything on a lie. They shouldn't have worked. By all rights and reason, they should have failed. But sometimes, Samuel reflected, the best things in life came from the chances you weren't supposed to take, the rules you weren't supposed to break, the people you weren't supposed to love. What are you thinking? Lily asked. That I'm glad you stepped off that stagecoach, he said. Scandal and all. She laughed, the sound bright as the stars overhead. So am I, Samuel McKenna. So am I. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, answered by a howl of recognition and welcome. The night sounds of the prairie rose around them, familiar now. No longer lonely, but full of life and promise. They'd started with deception and faced judgment, fire and hatred, winter and want. But they'd emerged into spring not just intact but stronger, bonded by trials into something unbreakable. The rancher had ordered a bride, but fate had sent him something better. A partner, a fighter, a woman who'd teach him that love wasn't about reputation or propriety, but about choosing each other against all odds. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Samuel and Lily as much as I enjoyed telling it. Where are you listening from? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect with fellow Western romance enthusiasts from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic tales of love, redemption, and courage from America's frontier days. What did you think of Samuel and Lily's story? Share your thoughts below.